What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every one of the weapons in Modern Warfare. And in today's episode, we're moving on to the second pistol. This is the 1911. And starting it off, as always, let's have a look at the damage profile. Now the damage profile on this is identical to the X16 as well as the M19, and you can see here there are clear differences in different parts of the body. So limbs will deal the least amount of damage, lower torso deals a bit more damage, and then upper torso deals even more damage than lower torso. But assuming you're shooting them in the torso, it's going to be a 3 to 4 shot kill. And when we have a look at the headshot multipliers, once again, we have double headshot multipliers from your lower torso damage. And this means we deal a lot of damage to the head. Just one headshot mixed in with a body shot will allow you to get a 2-shot kill within the maximum damage range. Now, moving on to our rate of fire, this is the slowest out of the 3 faster firing pistols. So the X16, 1911, M19, this is definitely the slowest at 284 rounds per minute, which means our time to kill isn't very good if we're not getting headshots. In the 3-shot kill range, it's 422 milliseconds, and in the 4-shot kill range, it's 633 milliseconds. These are very, very slow time to kill values. But if you are in those situations where you're getting a 2-shot kill, so 1 shot to the body, 1 shot to the head in close quarter situations, your time to kill is cut all the way down to 211 milliseconds, which is quite competitive with the primaries in this game. Now keep in mind with time to kill, we can reduce this with the trigger attachments, and we will be covering those later on in the video. Now, moving on to our ranges, as you can see here, our maximum 3-shot kill potential extends out to about 24 meters. However, there's another drop-off point there, and this is just like with the X16. Within that first damage drop-off point, it will be a 3-shot kill as long as you're not shooting them in the limbs. However, that second 3-shot kill range, that only applies if you're hitting the upper torso or the head. Lower torso shots will result in a 4-shot kill. Now, it is worth noting that out of the faster firing pistols, the 1911 does have the best range values. It's a little bit better than the X16, but not by a significant margin. So that does kind of make up for its slower rate of fire. As for suppressors, once again, the oil can suppressor, even though it states that it increases your ranges, at least currently, it's actually decreasing your range by 15%. Then we have the lightweight suppressor, which will decrease your ranges by 25%. And then finally, the monolithic suppressor increases your ranges by about 7.5%. As for hardcore, we've got an amazing 1-shot kill potential. Our first 1-shot kill potential that extends out to about 13.5 meters. This applies to anywhere in the body. So within that 13 meters or so, no matter where you shoot them, you should be getting a 1-shot kill as long as you're not shooting through some form of cover. Then from that roughly 13 meters to 24 meters, it will still be a 1-shot kill as long as you're not shooting them in the limbs. And then finally, if you're shooting them in the head, it will always be a 1-shot kill in hardcore modes, no matter what the range is, although you will have to account for bullet drop if you're looking at extremely long shots. As for hipfire, this is right in line with the comparable handguns, so the X16 and the M19, and it is noticeably better than the 357 and the 50GS. This brings us to idle sway, and once again, I was quite surprised to see that there is very little idle sway with this pistol. It barely moves at all, and this means if you wanted to, you can really line up a precise shot. Speaking of precision, let's have a look at the recoil, and as you can see here, this gun kicks pretty much straight upwards. There's barely any side-to-side bounce like we saw with the X16. However, it does jump a decent amount between many of the shots. Some of the shots will go in the same bullet hole, and then other times it will jump up quite a bit, and there's a decent amount of randomness when it comes to this as well. So I have found personally that sometimes this gun just kind of jumps out of control and it does something you don't quite expect. But if you're using it at really close ranges, generally this shouldn't be much of an issue for you. Moving on to our handling stats, the 1911 has the same aim down sight time as the X16 at 150 milliseconds, which is extremely fast. And our sprint out time is also insanely fast at 150 milliseconds. And even our tactical sprint out time is very, very fast at just 167 milliseconds. So there's almost no downside whatsoever to using that tactical sprint option with this pistol. As for our magazine capacity, this is definitely one of the downsides to using this gun over the other high fire rate pistols. Our magazine capacity is just 7 rounds, and we only get 14 in reserve unless we're using fully loaded, or unless we're using the Striker 45 as our primary. They will share the same ammo pool, so if you are going pistol only, just like I said with the X16, I'd recommend using the Striker 45 with extended mags and fully loaded on it, and that will give you a crazy pool of ammo to draw from for your 1911. Now, even though we have a small base magazine capacity, our reload time is very fast at just over 1 second, so you can reload this very quickly. And something that's really interesting with this gun compared to the others is if you use the sleight of hand weapon perk, we get the fastest reload time in the entire game at just 0.58 seconds. This happens in like a blink of an eye. I don't know why it's such an outlier here, but sleight of hand really helps you with the 1911. Now that's not to say that sleight of hand is absolutely necessary on this gun. Your base reload time is just fine. But using sleight of hand definitely makes me feel better about that 7-round magazine. Now finally for base stats, let's have a look at movement speed, and our movement speed with this gun is 103%, which is the same as the X16. However, our aim down sight strafe speed is just very slightly slower than the X16. It's hardly even noticeable at 71%. This is still a very fast aim down sight strafe speed, and it's much faster than any of the primary weapons in the game. So that pretty much covers it for the base stats with the 1911, although once again, just like with the X16, I want to point out that bullet velocity is a very important stat with this gun, and you will often be missing shots at mid to long range just due to the fact that you have such a low bullet velocity. I found even in hardcore modes, I line up a perfect shot on a moving target, and yet I still miss, and that's just due to the bullet velocity. So that's a stat you want to be aware of, especially while choosing your attachments. And now that we have all that covered, let's move into the unique attachments for this. Luckily, with the 1911, we don't have nearly as many unique attachments as with the X16. Let's start it off with the barrels, and the first one we have is the compact barrel. With this one, we do get a slight improvement to our aim down sight speed. You will now aim down sight 1 frame faster at 60 FPS, so your new aim down sight time is 133 milliseconds, which is nice, but completely unnecessary on this gun since it already aims so quickly. On top of this, our movement speed is very slightly increased by just 0.5%. This is hardly even noticeable, and this does come at the cost of, first off, a loss of bullet velocity, which subsequently also decreases our range by 10% on this gun. And on top of that, we do lose some recoil control, which if we have a look at it right here, you can see that there's definitely some more recoil there, a bit more randomness, and as a result, the upsides on this absolutely are not worth the downsides. And I would say just stay away from this barrel completely. As for the next one, this is the match grade barrel, and with this, we get a 15% increase to our damage range, which is a nice little boost. Also, our bullet velocity is sped up, so we're going to run into fewer of those situations where we shoot on target but actually miss. And our recoil control is improved a little bit, which if we have a look at the side-by-side right here, you can absolutely see an improvement here to the recoil control. There's still a decent amount of randomness in it though. You're not going to get really consistent recoil plots, but it does help for sure. As for the downsides with this barrel, our aim down sight time is slowed down by just 1 frame at 60 FPS, so our new aim down sight time is 167 milliseconds, which is still extremely fast. And our overall movement speed is reduced by about 1%. Overall, with this gun, I really feel like you can afford those downsides no problem, just because it's already so good in those areas that even if you harm them slightly, they're still going to be amazing. But this leaves us with one last barrel, and this is the Stalker Barrel. With this one, we get that same 15% increase to our damage range, which is a great boost. We also get that increase to our bullet velocity, which again, that's excellent. And the only downside is that very slight reduction to our aim down sight speed. It's going to be 167 milliseconds with this barrel. And therefore, just like with the last barrel, I'd say this one is a great choice as well. But that wraps it up for the 3 barrels that we have access to with the 1911. Now let's get into the magazine attachments, and the first one is the 10-round magazine, which states that it reduces your aim down sight speed, but it actually doesn't. At least at 60 FPS, there's no measurable change here whatsoever. However, it does reduce our movement speed by a whole 2%. That's a pretty decent loss in movement speed, especially for the Tier 1 extended mag attachment. And the really strange thing is, when we look at the next extended mag attachment, which is the 15-round extended mag, once again, we get no measurable change to our aim down sight speed. And you might have noticed already, we actually don't lose as much movement speed with the 15-round mag as we do with the 10-round mag. Now, I don't know why this is, but just know if you have both the 10-round magazine and the 15-round magazine unlocked, there is absolutely no reason to ever use the 10-round magazine over the 15-round magazine. So finally, for unique attachments, let's cover the most important attachments for the pistols in this game. These are the triggers. The lightweight trigger will pretty significantly speed up your rate of fire potential, up to 361 rounds per minute, which is great. The heavy duty reduces your rate of fire potential, so I would absolutely stay away from this. Your new rate of fire cap is 235 rounds per minute. And then finally, the match grade just slightly increases your rate of fire potential up to 330 rounds per minute. Overall, just like with the X16, I see no reason not to use the lightweight trigger. I use this 100% of the time while using any of the pistols. Now finally, just like with the X16 gun guide, I'm not going to be covering best class setups when it comes to the pistols, just because normally they're used as secondaries and therefore it just doesn't make sense to recommend a best class setup overall. But I did want to cover some of my favorite attachments to use, and this is going to be very comparable to the X16 as well. First up, I like using either the match grade or the Stalker Barrel. Either one of those is just fine. They both increase your range nicely and just give you some nice benefits with very few downsides that you need to worry about. Also, of course, the lightweight trigger, that's going to be on all of my pistols. The 15-round magazine for sure, if you've got it unlocked, you definitely want to be using that. And then on top of that, I often like using a monolithic suppressor because if I'm using a pistol, I'm already at a disadvantage in a gunfight, so I like to at least be able to stay off the radar, so I might be able to take the enemies off guard. And then finally, for an optic, I often like using an optic, especially in hardcore modes. However, in core modes, I would say it's a lot less necessary. It's just sometimes I'll throw it on, sometimes I won't. A couple other options would be the sleight of hand perk if you want that basically instant reload time, or fully loaded just to make sure you've got enough ammo. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's gun guide on the 1911. As for my thoughts on this pistol, unfortunately, I do feel this is the worst out of the faster firing pistols. It's not completely unusable, and it's not significantly worse than the X16 by any means. It's just slightly worse than the X16 in my mind, and I would say the M19 is the better of the three. But we will be getting into the M19 very soon, so I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about the 1911? Do you think it's a really good pistol, bad pistol, somewhere in between? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.